So, before I even begin, the little device that I'm using here is made by Wacom, just like your bamboos are. This is called the Graphire Wireless. They actually don't make these anymore. They sell them online, though. I really, really like this one above the new wireless one, the Intuos, made by Wacom, for simple reasons that make class time so much easier. Like, it can hold the pen. I mean, that's a big deal. You saw right there. That's a huge deal for me, because then I can use it as a clicker also. It's got this big space, and I could literally leave that room right now and I would have no delay. So this is a really, really great device. I love it. The other thing that is keeping me with these rather than moving straight to an iPad and using something like Doceri, which I think some people might be comfortable with, is that I can see my cursor right there, which is a big deal, because then I can stare at my webcam while I'm recording here rather than having to look down, which is what I found when I've used my iPad. Also, there's absolutely no pen delay at all, totally real time, which makes it really authentic for the students. There is a learning curve, so just take your shoes off, crack open a beer and do the alphabet like 100 times when you get home, and you'll be good, the next day. So there is a little bit of a learning curve, but what you gain in not having an image here, what you lose in that, you gain in speed of it. So it's a really, really great device. So I'm going to get started right now. And the title of this presentation is Flip Teaching, the whole picture. Now, flip teaching is kind of a buzzword right now, and I'm not a fan of buzzwords really, but I'm going to use the term because it's getting a lot of attention in the media, and I think it really describes what I'm going to talk about. But one of the things that I want to do for you guys is demystify what I think that term means, and then more than anything, demystify the tools needed to do it, so you guys can go and do it. And I apologize ahead of time if you guys are already, which I'm sure you are, really, really strong with a lot of the tools I'm going to show. But that's the most important thing for me, is to make this accessible. And we're going to talk a little bit about the Khan Academy, some positive things and some negative things that I do see. To me, looking at it through that lens, the only real glaring negative thing, if it's getting millions and millions of hits a day, if I was Sal Khan, I would have a button right there at the top that says, if you are a teacher, click this, and here's how I do this. And you really got to search to find out the tools. He's using a Bamboo, he's using Camtasia Studio. But it seems intuitive to us, but I think a lot of people think it's a lot harder than it is. It's actually really, really, really simple to do. So we've got a lot of people driven to that site. Let's just loop in teachers and empower them also. So that's something that's really important to me. Resources, as we're going through this, I have a website, flipteaching.com, that looks like this. And the purpose of this website is basically just to have all the tools located for you. So there's a lot of stuff that I'm not going to talk about today, but you can go and access it. And I have basically a database of all the tools I think you would need on any platform to make this happen. I just want to show you the way the website's set up a little bit. The first thing, when you open up, I have some various different flip teaching models for you to look at. This is the one that I do in my classroom. I call it the Explore, Flip, Apply model, and I'll talk more about it. But some other models, just so you get an idea of what we're talking about here. Down at the bottom, some resources, past slides, some research, websites. And then up here, I'll be talking about the 4 steps that I think go into making a really, really good online video using screencasting. One is writing screencasting, tracking that to make sure students have reflected on it, and then sharing it. And then there's some all-in-one devices that we're seeing right now, things like Show Me and Replay Note and that kind of stuff on the iPad. So you would click on any one of these, and then it would have links to it on whatever software you're on. Okay, so everything's here. You don't have to write anything down. And if you're interested in learning more about various workshops, you can click here and send me an email. And I've done 1 or 2 workshops that have gone really well at other school districts, so it's something I'm getting really excited about also. So I'd be happy to talk with you guys. All right, so let's get going. There's my email and my phone number. You can call me anytime if you guys come across any problems or you need any help or something you get particularly excited about you want to talk about. So my story, I got into this, we think about everyone's here, I really feel, because we love teaching, right? We love our students. We love the way technology affects things, like borderline obsessed with it. I mean, that's why we're all here. I mean, that's the truth. So, like, what are our triggers in the classroom because of that? For me, it makes me a little vulnerable. Like, I really, really care about teaching, and sometimes to the point where I can, just honestly take something a student might say a little bit more personally than I should because I care so much about it. And for me, my triggers were always walking down the hallway and seeing kids scribble down their homework and copying it, that kind of thing. And the main trigger for me was I knew how important it was for them to do that. And I knew how much it would just screw them over in the classroom because they copied it. And I also felt bad for them because they're so stressed out about getting into college. And I teach 17, 18-year-olds that they're just doing that because their minds aren't thinking about the moral implication. They're thinking about the grade. So I just really got frustrated with that, and just watching people's eyelids close in class while I was talking, just really, those two things just drove me crazy. So one of my goals over the last 5 years was how to address those two things simultaneously, to make the homework experience more meaningful and to make the classroom experience more meaningful. And that's the lens that I look at everything through, because those are my triggers. Kids cursing in class, kids talking when I'm talking, those aren't my triggers. I'm really bad at classroom management. But those things are my triggers. So if I could address those, I can have a meaningful, awesome experience in the classroom. So I started off trying to address those using a smart board. I accidentally hit the record button, and it captured my whole class period, and I noticed that at the end of the day when I saw the file on the computer. But I wanted to be able to do more of that kind of stuff at home. So I got a tablet PC, which was awesome, mainly because there was no pen delay, and I could write directly in Microsoft Word, which I thought was amazing. But I wanted to get a Mac, and there was no Mac tablet, so I discovered these things. It's a company that builds the software that underlies the airliner and all those other devices, too. So those all are fine as well. So I fell in love with these. They're multi-platform. I can upgrade my computer and use this one. I've had this one now for 4 years, and I've gotten 3 computers, so it's still going fine. Then I realized I could just capture my screencasts. So if I was really going to model what I'm going to talk to you about today, you would have watched last night the screencast of this presentation. It was really fast. Doesn't matter because you can rewind it. Okay? You would have come to class today, heard my voice, associated that voice with the screencast, gotten a little comfortable because you formed some relationship with that voice, and then we could spend time right now in the workshop. Okay? That's sort of the traditional flipped model. But the truth is, I recorded that screencast sitting in a corner at the O'Hare Airport, trying not to look like a weirdo, bent over. It's the truth. So that's how easy it was. So you're literally going to hear people calling out, plane delays and all kinds of stuff. But while I was doing it, I was thinking to myself, I can only do it because I'm using this device now, because I can take this anywhere with myself. I was actually using my Bamboo right here, which is what you guys all have. This is the older version. So that's a little bit about my story. This is a quote from Farb Nevi. He's the CEO of a test prep site called Grocket.com. You might have heard of that. I think this quote for me, and if some of you have seen this presentation before, really defines what's happening right now. The problem is not the tools. We have the tools. We have too many tools. The problem is the overlap between pedagogy. The field of research is, you might have heard of TPAC and all that kind of stuff. This is really, to me, what's really important. It's not about the tools, but it's about how the tools overlap with the pedagogy, things James was talking about earlier. And I think he really, really articulates this well in this quote. So because of that, we're going to look at the research first. And it comes out of an area called cognitive load theory, mainly done by a guy named John Sweller out of Australia. Then we're going to look at the intervention that comes out of the research so that we feel like we can convince people in a professional development workshop to use it. Another buzzword, I'm calling it tab casting, but that just really means screencasting what you're doing with a tablet. So, reverse instruction or whatever. I like this term because it brings together the tablet and the screencasting. But you can call it whatever you want. Then the design that you're going to use the tool for. So it doesn't end with just the tool, where I think a lot of professional development does. We're going to call that flip teaching, reverse instruction, whatever. And then you guys are going to be left with some production specifics on all platforms. That's what I hope to do. Is there anything up here that you guys don't see that you'd like me to talk about? Or just interrupt me if there are. All right, so the research.
I find that education, I think it don't matter where you go to school. Italy, America, Brazil, it's all the same. It's all just memorization. And it don't matter how long you can remember anything, just so you can parrot it back for the test. And I got this idea for a school I would like to start. Something called the 5-minute university. And the idea is that in 5 minutes, you learn what the average college graduate remembers 5 years after he or she's out of school. With the cost of like $20. That might seem like a lot of money, $20 just for 5 minutes. But that's for like a tuition, capping and gown, the rental, graduation picture, snacks, everything included.
I was going to stop after the 5-minute university, but I love the way it says snacks. So I had to keep it going. Father Guido Sarducci from Saturday Night Live. You know, it's a funny thing, but what fascinates me about this, and in longer workshops I'll show the whole clip, what fascinates me about this is the moment he says the 5-minute university, and he says what that is, everyone claps. And it's not like a clap because they think it's funny. It's more like an empathy clap. Like, they all, like, totally get it. And they, you know, this is in the early 70s, I think. And I think they totally get it because we all sort of can get a little bit of that as well, you know? And the ability to empathize with this, while, you know, a lot of it's, well, that's what school's all about, you know, some of it just sucks. It speaks to how we're looking at educating children. Are we looking at it through a lens of cognition, like what really works, what promotes meaningful learning, or are we looking at it through a lens of just delivering instruction? So I like to start off with this. And if we take a little look at a model of our brain, and we know the brain is a super dynamic place and it can't be reduced down to 2 boxes. But let's say that we're going to think about it in terms of 2 spaces. One we'll call the working memory. That's where live processing is happening. So when I'm talking to you, that's where you're chewing on this information. And one we'll call the long-term memory, where you're forming schema. So your phone number is now one thing. It's not just a bunch of 7 digits. Okay, that's where that happens. But the problem is, the working memory can be clogged up by the information and the environment. So the information is also just hard. Your calculus is just hard. It's got more of an information load. Yeah.
Vignette, because I've done a lot of tablet training, and I've seen teachers trying to use the tablet, but they can't pick the right answer because their brain's so busy working the tablet, they can't pick the answer. Yeah. And then you got to stop them and go, "Hold on, what are you trying to answer?" "Oh yeah." And I think our kids go through that a lot.
Yeah. So that's, Sweller would call that intrinsic cognitive load. It's got high element interactivity. You got to do things together. You got to coordinate them. Versus something that's like step 1, step 2, step 3. So you can have things that have 100 tasks, and the information load is really small. You have something that's 2 tasks and a high information load. Like taking a picture, a really good picture with a camera, you got to think about a lot of things simultaneously. So, and the environment load as well. You know, I talk kind of fast, so that's high environment load. It's the things the teacher are doing. It's the white space on paper. It's the way the classroom looks. I mean, I don't think any of us walked in here and felt stressed out into this building. I think we were all like really excited to be in here. So if those 2 things get too high, a student can experience cognitive overload. And in that case, this information is not going to enter in here. Okay? And we've all seen that happen with our students. We know what that looks like. So really the goal is to minimize both of these, and then the information can go in, and it can get processed, and it can go back, and it can go back again, and then the student's forming schema every time they do that, and they're learning. Okay. So this is the title of my dissertation at USF, and it's a long thing to chew on. But what we found out, and I'll talk more about this application, it was an application of flipped teaching called pre-training. You might have heard of it before. And what we basically did is we said, Well, they used to think that this was a static thing, right? That no information was just hard. So calculus has just got a set intrinsic load, right? But we're realizing now that you can actually make information appear to be less complex to kids without actually sacrificing the content of the material. So what we did is we took a whole unit on equilibrium, and we picked that because that was the most complex unit of the year based on the research. And the kids, 20 kids out of 40 kids that were randomly chose for this experiment, every single day before class, watched a 5-minute video on what they were going to learn in class that next day. So they'd come to class having seen a 5-minute clip, okay, that gave them the basic definitions and the basic concepts of what they were going to see. It didn't teach them everything. It just kind of whetted their appetite a little bit about it. So they came to class having been tricked into having a little prior knowledge. So what we did with those kids is basically it showed that information went back and forth a little bit with those kids, whereas it didn't with the others. So they were able to chunk those elements that John was talking about into individual elements. Okay? So they actually experienced a little bit less information load. So then after we looked at the data, they performed a little bit better and they had less mental effort when solving the problems. So for those kids, it felt easier, but they were doing the exact same thing in the exact same period of time. So we were using the screencasting to trick them into having prior knowledge, rather than using it for online instructions or anything like that. And really what we wanted them to do, we said, watch them about 5 minutes before you walk in the door. So kids were sitting in the hallways on their iPhones, plugged in, watching these little 5-minute things, walking into class, and they're like, I got this. I get what it's about, even if it was a really complicated thing. And then that's what I did all year long in my class. So that was their only homework, were pre-training videos, which was pretty cool. Any questions? Yeah.
Why do you say trick them into having prior learning? Because aren't they learning it?
Yeah, they are. It's just kind of the idea that they don't really realize that we were trying to just manipulate this here. They were, in their mind, I didn't tell them all this. I just said, you're going to watch these 5-minute videos. It's going to give you a little bit of background information on what you're going to learn in class. What we were trying to do was, what we're really trying to get them to do were to chunk. If there were like 7 things that they were having to think about, chunk those into maybe 4 things. Chunk those interactions that John was talking about, of all the things that kids had to do. Tricking them into already having a little bit of knowledge, so that when I then stood up here and did direct instruction, God forbid, it was easier for them. Right. And I actually did lecture through that whole experiment. I lectured every day, just so that we could see how that affected those kids. But that was a really, really powerful application, because homework was like 5 minutes, but super meaningful for that group of kids. So why is the interaction of a tablet and screencasting good for this? So if you look, I apologize about how I scanned this in. I know it looks really bad, but this is a question taken directly out of World of Chemistry, which is the book our juniors are using right now. And it's a worked example that we see. This is the book that all my students are going to have. It's a great worked example, right?
This gas problem.
Sorry, that's what you're going to see in a sec. It breaks out the variables for them. It gives them the equations. It rearranges it. Tells them everything they need to do. But what are some problems about this right now? Does anyone see anything? If you were a student, yeah.
The stuff that's crossed off, I think it's kind of distracting.
Okay, so the way that they showed the units being canceled here. Anything else?
Everything's already there.
Everything's already there, right?
It's not phased in at all.
Not phased in. Our inner Dan Meyer is like freaking out right now, right? So, anything else?
Assuming you know Avogadro's number.
Yeah, there's a lot of things we assume. What about where we're getting all the where's all the information going in through? All right, right? All right. So all the information's going in through one place. It's already there. We're assuming the students are going to put a note card over it or something and go through it that way. We're leaving a lot up to them, but it's better than nothing. And I remember when I first started teaching, this is what I would make and actually give them worksheets that had things, and I felt like I was doing an amazing thing that way. So I simply made a quick video of this exact same thing, showing the exact same steps, but just using a screencast. So if you look at that, some of you who know chemistry are like, I get it. And some of you are a little intimidated, right? So
in this gas problem, straight out of your textbook. So in this problem, it says you have a sample of hydrogen gas with a volume of 8.56 liters, a temperature of 0 degrees Celsius, and a pressure of 1.5 atmospheres. And it's asking you to calculate the moles, and we're talking pressure, volume. The volume was 8.5, one volume, one temperature, more than one T, or more than one N. We would get a new equation that says N, here's it is. Volume supposed to be in liters, 3 Kelvin here. You to solve for gram, K cancels, and of hydrogen gas.
okay, so I wasn't going to make you go through that. But obviously you can see if you're watching that as a student, that just feels better, right?
Well, as a horrible math person, I love the fact that you're showing me the process.
Yeah. Yeah, and the thing that you didn't see, because I didn't make you sit through the whole thing, was that there was a ton of stuff I said that I didn't write. So if you got all that information on the previous model, that page would have been cluttered. But because now I have 2 channels to work with, I have ears and eyes, I can throw way more information at them. They're not going to have to think about it simultaneously, because I'm not going to write it and say it. I'm either going to say it or I'm going to write it, or I'm going to do a teeny bit of both. Right? So all that really overlaps well with, we'll call it the cognitive architecture. So let's look at that. Here's that box again that we saw last time. So we got this intrinsic and extraneous load. So what are some ways we can minimize that, and how did it relate to what we just watched? If we offload text, so what I mean by that are things that I would normally write, now I'm going to say. Okay, so you're manipulating the fact that you have 2 places information can go. If we chunk material, so you didn't see it all at once, I brought it in segments. Okay, and then if we could pre-train students like I was talking about, so that video could have been what they watched for homework. All 3 of these things, a guy, most of this research comes out of Santa Barbara by a guy named Rich Mayer. There's a lot of multimedia learning theory stuff. He says that all these things will minimize intrinsic load. Extraneous load, so the environment, interactivity. So if the student can rewind you, and I think James was getting at this, I almost think there's a justice issue if you walk into class and you teach kids in class. They can't rewind you. If they do, you're eventually going to get annoyed. You're not going to say it the same way. Right? And then the kid who's gone, it doesn't get it, and then it's gone. It's like, I remember Chem 2A with like 450 kids in class, and it was just ridiculous when I was in college. So if a student can interact with it, that is huge for the environment. This is the big one. It's the personalization. So my kids watch a Khan Academy video and they get me in class. He says aqueous instead of aqueous. Right? I did one Khan Academy video and he said aqueous, and then I came to class and said aqueous, and that's all they paid attention to. Was the difference we said. It was great, and I actually use Khan Academy a lot for reference for myself and for my students, but if I'm doing pre-training, I want it to be the exact same voice. Looking at it through a lens of cognitive load. So that's why, for me, empowering you guys to be able to do it, it's a big thing. It's for this research-based thing. And also directing their attention. If you notice, I was underlining things, I was highlighting things, I was telling them what to look at that given time. So those things are going to really mess with extraneous load. So we got things that'll decrease complexity and things that'll make the environment more fluid. None of them are going to sacrifice the material itself, and now there's more room in the working memory. Any questions on the research side of things? And there's a lot of other ways of looking at this through a lens of neuroscience as well, but this was just where my research in college was. So the design.
But I didn't think it would be something that would somehow penetrate the classroom. But then I started getting letters from teachers. And the teachers would write saying, we've used your videos to flip the classroom. You've given the lectures. So now what we do, and this could actually happen in every classroom in America tomorrow, what I do is I assign the lectures for homework, and what used to be homework I now have the students doing in the classroom. And I want to pause here for I want to pause here for a second because there's a couple of interesting things. One, when those teachers are doing that, there's the obvious benefit. There's the benefit that now their students.
All right. So before, have you guys? Hopefully, a lot of you have seen Saul Kahn's TED Talk. This is where he got in a little bit of trouble after this talk. I think if you guys read a lot of the blogs online, he got in trouble. I think at that exact moment right there, where he said what he did, I feel, was reduce this process down to one thing. This assumption, this paradigm that we all teachers lecture. That's what we do. Okay. So what we need to do is we need to take the lectures out of the classroom and we need to open up the classroom. So that's a really, really great idea, and a lot of teachers lecture, including myself a lot of the time. Okay. But because he doesn't have a background in education, I think a lot of the people who are really passionate, especially physics teachers, about inquiry-based learning, modeling, things like that, they're not lecturing at all. They're using their classroom in really, really awesome ways. And I think this really rubbed people the wrong way a little bit. For me, it just defined the process in a way that was a little bit too simple, and it reduced it down to still just direct instruction, but online. We don't really want to think about it that way.
Can enjoy the videos in the way that my cousins did. They can pause, repeat at their own pace, at their own time. But the more interesting thing, and this is the unintuitive thing when you talk about technology in the classroom, by removing the one-size-fits-all lecture from the classroom and letting students have a self-paced lecture at home. And then when you go to the classroom, letting them do work, having the teacher walk around, having the peers actually be able to interact with each other. These teachers have used technology to humanize the classroom. They took a fundamentally dehumanizing experience, a bunch of 30 kids with their fingers on their lips, not allowed to interact with each other. A teacher, no matter how good, has to give this kind of one-size-fits-all lecture to 30 students, blank faces, slightly antagonistic, and now it's a human experience. Now they're actually interacting with each other.
So that's a huge point. And to me, that's the major, major benefit of just flipped teaching in general. What a lot of people don't talk about then is, okay, what do we do now that we have that extra time in the class? Because you take a teacher who's so used to lecturing and you give them the whole classroom period, and a lot of the professional development, when you guys go back, if some of you are interested in this, is helping people understand how to group students and how to do activities that make use of that 50 minutes that you now have in class. So after watching this, I came up with my own definition of what I think flipped teaching is for me. And I define it as using native teacher produced, so I say native teacher produced to maximize the personalization effect, to decrease extraneous load, to shift any form of instruction, anything, from the classroom to the homework setting. So I think that's a broader definition for me. It's not saying we're going to take lecture and put it away. It's saying we're going to open up 5 minutes of class time by putting something in the homework setting. So you're using the homework in a meaningful way. And we're going to talk later about ways of ensuring students are using that in a meaningful way. That's a definition that I think is whittled down to what it means to me. So let's look at some models of ways to do this. You guys, anyone read Drive by Dan Pink? Right. Amazing book, right? There's a moment in that book where he makes this statement, and I think he's really just naturally alluding to. He spends this whole book talking about what motivates students. Right? So his mind is all, or what motivates people. And then he says, with a little thought and effort, we can turn homework into home learning. It was a moment in that book, and I think that really, really, to me, defines exactly what bothered me initially when I saw kids in the hallway copying stuff down. So I think there's a really huge point. He actually went on about a couple months later to publish an article in an online magazine called The Telegraph that featured a teacher named Carl Fish out of Colorado. It's called Flip Thinking. And I think he realized this was happening, brought out other teachers like Aaron Sams and John Bergman out of Colorado that are doing amazing stuff, kind of the pioneers of this movement. And that word flip really became branded at that time. So he was big on that. And to me, he's really convincing. I love Dan Pink's work. Just the way that he articulates things. So it was nice to see him on board with the movement as well. So if you look at a standard class design, I'm talking chemistry right now. I sent an email out to the AP Chemistry listserv a couple of years ago and just said, what does your normal class look like to everybody? And this was really what I got back, and it looks a lot like my chemistry class in high school, but it was 5-minute warm-up, 15 minutes for homework review, instruction 30 minutes, and practice time 10 minutes. Call it the standard class design. So where do you guys think the most meaningful learning occurs? If you had to pick one place or two places.
I'm going to say warm up and practice.
Okay. Anyone else?
Warm up and instruction.
Warm up and instruction.
Review.
If it's done right, homework review.
So obviously the answer is all of them are meaningful, but in terms of the research, the stupid question, right? So it turns out in terms of the research, though, like Rich Mayer would say and John Sweller would say that John was right. Warm up and practice are where they're moving the information back and forth. That's like how you would define learning, forming schema. That's where that's happening. However, they need, like in James' class, they don't know about history, right? They need that. We all, like, and this is what makes our job fun too. There's a fun thing about having information that you're giving to somebody. Like that's a fun aspect of teaching. So they're all important, but the question then becomes when should they occur? You know, if we have this outside of class time and we have this inside of class time, what do we want to have control over? So the traditional flip model says we can get the instruction out, okay, call that the homework, and then we can fill the rest of the class time in with practice. That's kind of the traditional flip model that Salkan was talking about. If you ever have listened to at ISTE, Aaron Sams and John Bergman talk about it, this is kind of the essence of the mastery learning model with flip teaching, where students are working through it at their own pace. We'll call that the traditional flip design. So now you have this 60 minutes of in-class, 50 minutes of in-class time. What are you going to do with that now, right? You're going to get kids grouped differently. You're going to find kids that need to be retaught, have them aside. You're going to assign master student teachers to work with other kids. You're going to use that time to push kids forward on lab activities, working through problems that they would normally not have done. You're going to have like this control thing over their ability to do hard problems. So for me as an AP teacher, this was great because I could give my students the hardest problem I've ever seen in my life, that if I gave them for homework, I would be crucified on things like rate my teacher and all that kind of stuff, right? But if I give it to them in class, I can watch them just struggle, and I can know in my head that I'll tell them how to do it before they walk out of that door, right? So then I really just, it was amazing watching the things that they would cognitively struggle with and me feeling good about it because I wasn't going to leave them having to go to bed with that struggle. So that's why I like having control over the practice in class.
Ramsey,
Yeah.
I want to just bring up a point here because when I've talked to people about doing this, one of the things they bring up is, well, but I really like to be able to see my kids' faces as I'm teaching, doing that 30 minutes of instruction. So, and I've always kind of struggled with that because, of course, you want to be seen who's getting and who's not. But I like what you just said, and I'm actually speaking up so that I can remember this better, that I would flip that on them and say, you still get to do some of that, and make sure that before they leave, you're comfortable with where they're at, that they do get it, because you allowed them to practice, and made sure they got it before they left.
Yeah. Well, and you know, first of all, if you look at any research, it's 80-20 student effect, teacher effect, right? So teacher really already only has 20% effect, and then you're standing up and going 1 on 30, so you're diluting that 20% big time, right? And that's what Khan said. He said it's a dehumanizing experience. You're turning it into a humanizing experience. Whereas I know that those 5 kids are rock stars. I just know that because you know and you get to know your students. And I can sit down and work with somebody directly, you know, and that is way more of a humanizing experience. Also, if they're plugged in watching the lecture the night before, that is also more humanizing because they're getting it one-on-one and they're able to rewind it. And I'm respecting the technology that exists as well. Yeah.
Do you build in any type of feedback or request any input from the students when they are watching those videos at home?
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm going to get to that. And that really gets to the meat of when this started working for me. So this is the model that I use in my classroom, and this is based on the work of a guy named Karplus, who's a physics instructor in the early 70s. And the reason that I like, and this is what I've done for the last 2 years, the reason I like this is because it's really just a learning cycle that works really well for science learning specifically. The original Karplus model, there's a great blog actually by Frank Nocesi, and if anybody has read his blog, where he compared Kant to Karplus, and he was one of the huge people that was kind of a opponent to the Khan Academy online over the last couple of months. But the original Karplus model is explore, explain, apply. So what I did is just took the explain and flipped it. So the explain piece is what happens online. So it's a 2-day cycle instead of a 3-day cycle. So the first day, students will come into class and we'll do an inquiry-based lab activity. Minimal instructions, little bit of lab, a little bit of a worksheet maybe. They're in groups, and it's things like dissolve this salt until it doesn't dissolve anymore, and figure out, you know, the maximum amount of stuff that can dissolve, or, you know, something just really, really open-ended. Okay, but that is related to the concept of, let's say, molarity, that they are then that night then going to watch a video on. So no longer is flipped teaching just direct instruction. Flipped teaching is the second day of a learning cycle where they've already had a chance to struggle with it. And this is huge in science because it's really it's one of the only subjects where they've lived in the subject their whole life. So they come to the table with all this prior knowledge and jumbled up stuff that needs to be organized. And if you organize it by saying, here's the truth first, sometimes they're going to struggle with that. They want to play with it first and convince themselves that there are some misconceptions before we then fill it in. And then the next day, we do classroom application. So the way I always choose what the application is what is the end result. So in AP class, we're working through AP problems. In my regular class, we're doing real-life example problems and standards-based stuff. Sorry about that. So this is a video that kind of takes you through what I was talking about. In the first day, kids are playing with the material. Okay, and they're doing looks. At night, they're watching the video for homework that demystifies it. I'll talk a little bit more, but what you're going to see is there's an associated Google form with the video. So kids are going back and forth, filling in a summary of the video they've watched. You know, this is speeded up, by the way. They're watching it, they're chunking it, rewinding it, filling in the form, making a little summary of the lesson. Once I started doing this form piece, everything changed. Okay, immediately. So they're going through the lesson. This is the night before. Hopefully what they're doing is following a rubric that I've made for them as how to write the summaries of that. John?
Mention how you handle copy-paste on this.
Okay, yeah. I'll do it live for you guys. Okay, so they're going through it. They're getting some examples. I always use the same template for my lessons. We do concepts first. We do examples and definitions and that kind of thing. They hit submit. Goes to the Google spreadsheet. I get that night. I give everyone 5 points for watching the lecture. Next day, they walk into class. We do a brief Q&A. The way I do the Q&A is I pump all those responses from the spreadsheet into Wordle and make a word cloud out of their responses. Once they get the word cloud, I ask them the question. I say, are all the words that are big supposed to be big? And that starts it off. Are the words that are small supposed to be small? So that came directly out of their responses. And this is actually a really nice example because they just watched a lesson on the ideal gas law. And the ideal gas law involves pressure. Okay, it's a law. It involves volume and temperature and all that kind of stuff. So 5-10 minute discussion. And then we just jump into the application piece. And this is just a meaningful Q&A. I'm not saying, what did you guys not get? You know? And then we can randomize it. And sometimes I'll be like, come up here and see if you can read the really small letters. And they'll come to the board, you know. But it's all interacting with the lecture they just watched.
I could see them, like, when they're writing their summary the night before, just predicting what this is.
Oh, yeah. And then we print them out. We have them on the wall all over the place. It ends up being see, this is the design thing I'm talking about. Wordle's a tool. We've seen the Digital Goonies and people like that talk about tools, right? Here's a cool tool. Here's a cool tool. Here's a cool tool. But here's a cool tool that we're using for Q&A of a learning cycle that involves a lot of other cool tools that's based in the research. So then,
How long did it take you to create that?
I'll do it in front of you right now. I'll do it right now. Okay, so then they're applying the next day. So if you, this is what always excites people, is this piece right here. This is when this presentation goes from dull to like. All right, so if you guys want to see real quick, let's go to that exact spreadsheet. It is a Google conference, so what? By the way, I wish there was a documents button initially. All right. So here, there's my chem lectures. Here they all exist. Because it's here, I can sort by the lecture, right? So the reason I use one form the whole year, so everything's cataloged in one space, by the way, so I don't have to keep going through it. Although I'm thinking about using Flubberoo for specific self-graded responses, which is another application. All right, so we could take 13.4, and we could just copy everything. And then we could open up Wordle. And then we can say create. Paste it in. Alright, so this came out of that one. You can randomize it. Yeah, however you want. So you can get them through a lot of things. But I don't even do it every day because then it's overkill. But a lot of times they get excited about it because I've actually asked the question. I said, draw the word cloud for last night's lecture. So you do this 3 days in a row, then they draw it. And then you hold each one under the document camera instead. Or you take a picture of it with your iPhone and, whatever. You get Ustream on your iPhone and up there and you hold it over or something. And then the kids can all do it. And once you do that, then they have to really start thinking about the lecture even more. So just kind of a cool, neat application of that. So other ideas, the pre-training model I talked about earlier, homework solutions. I heard a quote once, I have no idea where it came from, but I always love to quote this, and a little plug for TEDx at Hundredths High School coming up on August 5th. I can actually say the real quote, what I remember writing down. But it went something like 50% of the students need you to go over homework more than once. 50% of them don't need you to go over it at all. So if you go over it once, you don't reach anybody. So I don't know how true that is, but I remember thinking to myself, I have to go over homework. It would be a justice issue if I didn't go over homework. But what I've seen some teachers do is just take that 15 minutes and throw that online. So teacher walks in and says, if you need to see the homework, go to the homework link on the website and rewatch it as many times as you want. So you're putting them in charge of your own learning, and you're cataloging for the 50% that needed it more than once. You're also respecting that really nerdy kid that needs that time and doesn't want you to go over it in class. So you're like giving everyone a lot of love. Live essay grading. I teach a class at USF, a research methods class, and I do this when I grade their theses. I just go through and pull up track changes and go through and just screencast myself going through their paper. And then I send them a link. Instead of giving them a paper that's all crazy marked up, and then they're pissed off and they just, it's not productive for them. Everything's going in one channel. It's all about cognitive load. Everything should be about maximizing their working memory. Meaningful substitute lessons. So on my class website, I just have a link that says sub lesson, and the lesson would be go to musalamchemistry.com, click on this date, play this video, have students now practice this problem, now play solution to video. And the kids get practice, they get the solution. It's a meaningful way to spend the class period. And then you can do that from anywhere also if you put it online. We'll talk some more about your guys' ideas later on in the workshop session. And one is flipping the entire teacher. So doing it from a student end, which we talked about.
Hi, I'm Bob. And I'm Paul. And today we're going to teach you how to round a decimal. Today, we're going to round 6 and 263 thousandths. Thousandths as in THS. Because it's in a decimal area, you have to put thousandths because it's a part of a whole. So, now we're going to round to the hundredths place, as in THS. So now we have to figure out behind the decimal, which is a hundredth. And that's the 6, which is 2 spaces over from the decimal, to the right. So Bob told me that he had a saying about rounding decimals in regular whole numbers. So what you do is you look at the hundredths place, and you say to the place to the right. You say, which in this case is the thousandths place. Number 3. You say 5 or above, give me a shove, as in you would move the 6 up to a 7. Or you say 4 or below, keep me down low. So we look over to the right and we see that 3. That's below Is 3 a 4. higher than 5? No, so we keep it down low. So what you do is you keep it as 6.26? Exactly.
Wow.
So the answer, you take out the 3, and there's your answer. 6.26.
So, if any of you guys have been lucky enough to meet Eric Marcos, he's a teacher in LA and has a website called mathtrain.com. And he does a lot of work for TextMath, and his whole thing is flipping the classroom, teacher-produced videos. So kids sign up for different concepts. They come into his room after class. That was done using just a straight tablet PC, and he uses Camtasia Studio. And you can tell it's a tablet PC based on the way the eraser looked, if you're really used to using that kind of stuff. And you get everything. You get the personalization effect because kids are familiar with one another. Okay, and then you get all this other crazy empathy, peer-to-peer learning stuff, which is a whole other area of research. So I'd argue that he's got probably the ideal setup. He does it the way we all, I don't feel comfortable having my kids teaching the Henderson-Hasselbalch equation about buffers and stuff when we're doing it. But I would feel comfortable with them teaching, some simple chemical nomenclature, some chemical reactions. So he provides a model of really where I want to go because I think it really overlaps well. The only thing is, and this is because I'm really nerdy, is kids might not used to be seeing each other's handwriting. So they're really used to seeing my handwriting, but we can get around that. So the specifics. If you were to go to, and let's just go there right now. Does anyone have any questions before we get into the specifics? Because we'll be done after this.
You said you were going to talk about how you handle copying and pasting in the spreadsheet for the summaries.
Oh, yeah. So, I'm sorry about that. What I do the first day of class, when I walk in, and I'll show you my first lecture. I'm rebuilding all my lectures right now, so I only have 2 up. But I'll show you the first one. Give the kids a brief little idea of how to do the summaries and stuff. That's all I say. They go home, they do them. They walk into class, and then I pull up the spreadsheet, and because it's all in the spreadsheet, you can sort their responses alphabetically, right? So what that means is ones that are identical are going to show up right next to each other. So if kids wrote a summary and then emailed whatever the other kid's their summary and put it in, you can catch it. And it always usually happens with at least one section. So the kids see it with their eyes right there, and they kind of laugh about it. But they see, and I give them credit, whatever, and then they see, though, that I can do that. And they just trust that I'm going to do that every time after that point, which I don't ever do that ever again, right? If you're watching. But the thing is, it's like they're digital natives, right? Their world is in trusting this stuff. So you pull up a spreadsheet, you sort it, and you say, you guys both just shared that, and you laugh about it, and you give them a safe space to admit it. But they're just never going to do it again. They're just not going to. So that's usually what I do the first time, and then I throw it into the word cloud. And often I'll just pull up a really nice one and read it to the class. But I have a rubric for that, which I'll show here in a sec.
Ramsey,
yeah.
The flipteaching.com is where you've got all that other stuff, and then this AP Chemistry.
Yeah, so there's a link to that off of the bottom of in the extra content below Flip Teaching. There's all the links to everything, and I'll go to this from Flip Teaching just so you can see. So if you go to the bottom of Flip Teaching, related sites. This is my AP Chemistry site. So here is the way that I have it set up.
It also, at the end of today, I'll email you guys the link, and all the presenters have their own page, and so they'll have all of their links on those pages.
So literally, I want extraneous cognitive. It sounds like a broken record. I want the environmental load to be low. That means low clicks. So when they open up the website, all they're going to see is the video that they have to watch that night. And I'm going to post that. So they open up the website. There's lecture 1. It's molarity. There's a form right below that they have to fill out.
If you didn't have this site and you were just sending out videos, what would you do about forms?
I use Google Sites. I use Google Sites, yeah, because it's all built in. Or I use Blogger. You can use anything you can embed anything into. I don't like having a link to the video and a link to the form because that's extra clicks. And what I want kids, okay, so if you think about good professional development, one of the things you'll have these people come to your school and talk about, you know, chunking and chewing and like think, pair, share and that kind of stuff. They talk about that because that really works. That's the way our minds work. But it's not really authentic if I do that with you right now. I say, now talk to your neighbor and come back to me. You're all going to kind of talk about something else, right? And then you're going to come back to me. But if you put this link, embedded link, right below the video, a kid's going to say to himself, I get credit when I fill out that summary. It's easier for me to fill it out when I stop and I write a sentence, and I play and I stop and I write a sentence. So their mind is chunking it because it works. That's the way the mind's built. And then they're going to rewind it. And if you watch that kid, I mean, that was me doing that one in that video earlier. Right? That wasn't the kid doing it. But that's just what they do. I sit and watch them in the library do it all the time.
Just so everyone knows, when you fill out a Google form, there's an option when you publish
First lecture of the year. Now, if you're watching this lecture, you should have had a chance in
I'll show you guys that.
explore with these ideas. And then the point of this lecture is to fill in any gaps, give you a little bit more information, and then in class the next day we're going to play with these equations.
So I'm just talking about I'm not making it a big deal. I'm just talking about what we're going to do.
This is our first one. So when you're doing a lecture, you want to follow along in your learning packet. You want to write everything that I write. For instance, in your notes, in your learning packet here, we're going to label this lecture 1, and the title of lecture 1 is...
So I've made a PDF of this template, and I just use it every time.
Now, the most important part of doing a lecture is doing summaries of the lecture. And you notice here, right below the video you're watching, you do have a summary box. And if you don't know how to do the summary, you can go here and click this button and look at an example of a summary. It needs to be 5 sentences, and this shows you exactly how to do it. If you want to get these lectures...
So I specifically didn't pull that up for them, because I want them to do that on their own to go do that.
Get it in iTunes, meaning you're going to subscribe to a podcast. You need to keep plugging your iPhone in and updating it to get the videos of your iPod, etc. Or even directly on your computer if you have iTunes. But you need to go back and fill out the summary. This is the way that I give you that 5 points that you get for each video. I do not recommend you watching the video all the way through, taking notes, and then doing the summary. What I recommend is you watch the video. Once a point comes up, something you understood or you didn't understand, press pause. You're in honors, actually. Following you.
Okay, so then I go through and I talk about the concepts first. I then give them definitions, and then I close with 2 examples. And that's the way every video is.
And let's say we have
Concepts, definitions, 2 examples. And then they come to class, and I'm confident that their misconceptions were identified in the concepts, that their definitions gave them safety in the fact that they felt like they had the vocabulary they needed to do to talk about it, and then the examples gave them time to work back and forth in their working memory a little bit right before class. And then we can just jump right into problems. And if they've watched it, they're good. And if they haven't watched it, they didn't get the 5 points, but they can go to a computer in the classroom and do it before. So that's just the rule. The rule is time-stamped 1 second before the bell rings. You know, so 5 years ago, kids scribbling down stuff in the hallway. Now, kids sitting in the hallway plugged in, watching the video, typing in the summary on their iPhone. Just a totally paradigm shift in terms of the way that they interact with that space. But the thing is, they don't know that they're doing all these different things. They're just doing what you tell them to do. And it fits with what they normally do. All right, so if you were to watch that video, and to make that happen, there were a bunch of steps that needed to happen. First, you had to have the tablet you got in front of you. Okay? Then, you got the tablet, but doesn't mean you can write at all. Okay? So then you got to be able to write. And that's the ability to interact with some software on your computer. How much time do I have?
About 20 minutes.
Okay. Once you can write, and this, by the way, is the absolute hardest piece. This is the hardest piece. And I'll talk about why in a second. You need to record the screencast, send it over to YouTube, that happens in one step. All the screencasting softwares have built-in one-touch buttons to YouTube now, so you got to think about that. You want to track them, meaning have that Google form associated. James showed that on the right-hand side. He had that in his Google site. I had it right below. That's the piece that's going to give you the ability to give them credit. And the other thing I realized, I was like, when I lecture to students, I never gave them credit for listening to me lecturing. Now they actually even get points for the lecture. It's like a whole built-in reward system. Now, Dan Pink would hate me right now, but it's a whole built-in reward system that really helps them. And then you got to share it, so it needs to go out to the world. Those are all the steps that need to happen to make this happen. So let's talk about this on different platforms. Those are the two most important pieces, I think, though. The hardest one to do and the most important there at the top. In terms of tracking, this is the summary that I use. There's a link to this on flipteaching.com. This works really well for me, but you can use whatever you want. I just wanted there to be a set rubric that they followed every time. So the first sentence, in this lecture we learned, they give me the specifics. In the second sentence. Then they tell me something they got, they tell me something they didn't get, and then they tell me something it's related to in the real world. And that number 5 is tricky when you're talking about something really complex. So I know that if I gave them a 5-minute video, they're still having to do all of this. And this involves digging online and going to, using Edutecher and all those other great sites to be able to find information online that they can answer that question with. And it's really cool to see those responses. So now that I use this, I feel so safe in assigning a short video because it usually ends up being a little bit longer. And this process really helps them go through all of those pieces well. In order to be able to write, there's really 2 ways of doing that. One I call writing over, and one I call writing in. And it's really important to not... it's really important to understand the difference in when to use each. So writing over would be like, I'm standing behind a mirror or a window. You write on the window, and then I move, and the writing stays there. This is what you see in a lot of online programs, right? And then writing in would be you scribbling on my face, and then I move, and it stays with me. Writing in is way more important, because if you write over a PDF document and you scroll, you've lost it all, right? But writing over is really important if you want to write over a video, because the video doesn't have a pen tool in it for you to write in. So I'm going to demo 2 on the Map platform. One is called OmniDazzle, and the other is called Formulate Pro that I like a lot. Links to all these are available. OmniDazzle is awesome because with a couple buttons, there, is it loaded? It's right here. Okay. So it writes right over Keynote too, because Keynote doesn't have a pen tool like PowerPoint does. So a couple buttons. I got my pen tool up right now. I can write. I can switch the colors with some keystrokes. And I can write. This is great. Okay. The only thing now is, and if I want to erase it, all I have to do is shake this, and it'll go away. But I'll go to the next slide. See, it stays there, right? So that's called writing over. And you can, that's great for writing over a video. That's really the only time that I use it. Now, writing in is really useful because writing in allows you to write over the things that kids are holding in their hand. So if you give kids a worksheet and you solve that worksheet, if you solve the problems on PowerPoint and they're holding a worksheet, extraneous cognitive load goes up because what you have is different than what they have. These are really subtle things, but they can make a big difference, right? So what I'll do is then just take a worksheet. We'll take that template that I had. Right, here's that lecture template. Drag it into Formulate Pro, which is right there. It opens it up. Okay. I zoom in. It's a vector image. I zoom in so I don't lose any quality there. And now I have my simple pen tool. And I can do my thing. I can scroll down and it stays there. I can change colors if I want. So this is different than the pen tool built into Adobe or in PDF Pen. That's meant for signatures. So if you use that, what's going to happen is you're going to write and then a text box is going to appear around that. and it's going to annoy you, and it's going to annoy your students. So this is made for this right here. You can use the smart software or the stuff that comes with Active Inspire, but for me, that's so busy. It's got all kinds of other stuff. I want something that is just like my pen tool. Here I am. There I go.
How much is Formulate Pro?
Free. You can download it off my site right now.
Uniboard's pretty good too if you go to getuniboard.com.
Uniboard?
It's got a couple more tools than that, but it's still very clean.
Okay, cool.
And a big red button to record.
James, can you write that down so I don't forget? All right, thanks. All right. Okay, so those are the two. These are Mac-based ones, but there's equal great stuff on the PC level, and we'll talk about that right now. So again, those are the two different ways of writing, and it's important to understand when you'd use both. I really only use in. Screencasting. There's really 3 types of screencasting software. One is simple kind without editing, so like Jing. Built-in doesn't have an editing environment. However, YouTube has editing tools. So if you put that thing in Jing and you upload it to YouTube, you can then edit it and do all the cool stuff James showed earlier. Editing it. The exact same kind of editing you'd be able to do in something like Screenflow. 2, built-in with editing, and 3, online. So we're talking things here like ScreenR and Screencast-O-Matic, things that are built in online. Those are the 3 ways. And I was going to do a demo, but I'm not going to do a demo of the screencasting stuff right now because we can work at that in the lab, in the workshop time together, but I do want to talk about some that I really like. If you have a Mac and you have QuickTime X, you have screencasting built in already, unlimited time. You don't have to get anything else. It has built-in screencasting. You go to New Screen Recording, done. And it's got an Upload to YouTube button. So you're good if you have that. Jing is really, really, really awesome though because it's so quick and it's got a lot of cool things built in and it's just really fun. I use Jing a lot when students are making screencasts because they love to play with the sun and all kinds of stuff. Screenflow is what I was going to demo. I think if you have Jing, there's two accounts. There's free Jing and Jing Pro. Jing Pro is like $16 a year or something like that. Jing Pro has the YouTube button. Regular Jing doesn't. Regular Jing uploads to a site called Screencast.com. Which again, I think having that one button YouTube is really, really important. And then for the online software, I'm going to talk about my recommendations. I was going to demo Screencast-O-Matic, and this is the one that I really recommend. And I'll talk about why in a sec. Okay, so these are the different types of screencasting options. So on the Mac platform, I would say if you just want to do this tonight, I would say take your Bamboo for the hardware piece. Throw that Bamboo into a couple different places. I didn't talk about Jarnal, but Jarnal is a really, really good open source PDF annotator. Or you can throw it into Formulate Pro. These are the 2 in. I would say don't even worry about over. OmniDazzle's free though. I use Jarnal for screencasts that I do at home, and I use Formulate Pro for things I do in class. You saw how easy it was for me to pull that into Formulate Pro. Okay, that's why I do it in class. So if I'm walking around solving a problem. Jarnal has some more cool color and pen tools that are really easy to access, so I use that one for my online screencasts. But it's a little bit funkier, so I don't want to walk around the class with this funky thing up there that I need to have more control over. So Formulate Pro is really stable, less options, so I use it in class. Less stable, a lot of options, so I use that at home. Okay, then I would, you can use one of these. I would use one of these 2 things here for my screencast software because I want the editing environment. Screenflow and Camtasia Mac, although I said Screenflow is really where it's at, I think, right now. Or QuickTime. And that's what it looks like if you just scroll down. You can do new screen recording there at the top. Throw that directly into YouTube, use my Google form to track, and use a Google site to publish it all on if I don't have my own website. That's what I'd recommend. On the PC platform, start with the Bamboo. Zornal is the equivalent of Jarnal in the PC world. It's another open source thing. It works really well, and it's meant for writing over PDFs, not signatures. It's meant for writing over PDFs. And PowerPoint in the PC has a great pen tool. If you hover over the bottom left of a PowerPoint slide, you get a pen. And the reason I don't say this with the Mac people is this pen in the Mac environment doesn't stay with the slides, and you can't save it with the slides. Whereas in the PC environment, it's built in, and you can save the slides with that annotation. So you really got more flexibility with PowerPoint on the PC end. I'd throw that. I use Camtasia Studio. You know, it is around $300 though, so it's a really expensive piece of software. Throw it into YouTube and use my Google form and my Google site. If I'm using a purely online platform, what if I want to use my Bamboo and use only online tools? Okay, what would I do then? Use my Bamboo. I'd use a website called Crocodoc I just found recently. Crocodoc is really, really cool, and it allows you to annotate PDFs online really well. So it does everything that Formulate Pro and Jarnal do, but it's online. And it's really good. It's got some good pen colors to choose from. It's not chunky. It's really nice. I actually might use Crocodoc for everything now, actually, coming up. I'd use Screencast-O-Matic instead of any other one online. I'd use Screencast-O-Matic because there's no time limit, easy upload to YouTube, and there's a pro version for like $5 a year that has editing and HD embedding. So it's a really, really good option, and it's free. Throw that directly into YouTube, Google Docs, and my Google site. That's what I did. And almost done here, guys. On the iPad platform, 2 months ago, this wasn't available. So if I wanted to just use my iPad, how would that look? I take my iPad, and I can skip the writing piece because now the writing and screencasting are mushed together on the iPad. Okay, and there's 3 programs that you can do that with. Replay Note, Show Me, and yesterday, ScreenChomp was just released by TechSmith. But I'm going to say, oh, and then you don't want to use your finger. I'd use the Bamboo stylus. It just came out by Wacom. That's the best way to go. Less pen delay. And out of all these 3, I love you, David TechSmith. I'm sorry about this. I would use Replay Note, because Replay Note's the only one that has one button upload to YouTube, and it also has the ability to write over PDFs. You can import a PDF through iTunes with Replay Note. And I'd use Google Docs and Google Sites again. See, I skipped a step. Now, I struggle with this though right now, and I struggle with it because there is a pen delay, and I struggle with it because I don't see the cursor, and I wouldn't use this to present in class also. So I'd use this to present in class, and I'd use that one at home. So there's a little bit of a difference there, but it's a really, really good solution. Show Me is building a really, really nice community right now. Everything goes to the Show Me website right now, so I really like this ability to go out to YouTube. Any questions on the iPad end? Okay, so for me, I want to use this though, but I don't want to use it for my screencasting. So here's how I'm going to use it this year. I haven't done this yet, but here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to build in an on-the-go Q&A system with my kids. So what I'm going to do is say, text me or email me a question, any question you have. All right. And yes, I give my kids my cell phone number. Sorry. So text me, email me a question. You got to get a question. They're like, I don't get this problem. I got my iPad on me, so I sit down in my car. I immediately do it on Replay Note, real quick, but YouTube. And then the kids then have access to the channel where all those go. So they'll know to check the channel 15 minutes after they text me the question, and the answer should be there. Rather than me emailing them back and forth, we're going to build in this community where all their answers are cataloged in one space. So it's on-the-go Q&A. I haven't done it yet, so I always have these ideas at the beginning of the year that fail. So the way I just have it set up is simple. And I wanted to embed the channel into my website, but I wasn't able to figure that out. I guess you can't iframe a YouTube site, right, into your. I tried to embed a whole channel, but so Q&A buttons right here. Step 1, text or email me a question. Step 2, click here for the video solution. So I'll get a text, I'll solve it. They'll click here. It'll take them to the class YouTube channel where not only all our lectures for the year will be cataloged, but also the response they saw. And I would say your question, Samantha's question at this time, that's the way I title it. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on what's coming up with the AirPlay being able to instantly capture on the iPad, being able to instantly project what's going on the iPad? How would you work in like the screencasting thing? So So like iOS 5 is coming out, and you'll be able to instantly push your whole screen on the iPad up to your 2.5 to 2 weeks projector.
Okay, so that's like what Doceri kind of does,
Yeah.
right? So my whole thing is efficiency. So what I've noticed with Doceri is a delay, pen delay. I've also noticed that when I put my finger, when I hover above the iPad, I don't see the cursor moving. So for me, that's big, because if I'm recording a screencast and I want some picture-in-picture, I want to be looking there. So what I mean is I want to be able to see the cursor when I'm looking at the camera. I don't want to have to go down and know where I'm at and come back up. So those are just little subtle things that when you do it every day can kind of be a drag. So I'm excited about this on-the-go Q&A thing because I think that it might be a cool way to interact with kids, maximizing their cognitive architecture, right, like we were talking about, rather than me emailing them back a question. Also, it builds a community of people who will see their responses.
Well, heck, how nice it is. If you get a question and you can say, check the channel.
Yeah.
You don't have to keep answering the question. It's already cataloged.
Yeah. And the cool thing is because it's built into the website, that's what they know to do then. They'll go there once. What I wanted to do was have the channel embedded right here. So I tried to do an iframe where I put the YouTube channel in the website itself, but I wasn't able to figure out how to do that. So if anyone knows how to do that,
We'll talk later.
yeah, show me. So I'm almost done here, and I'll let you guys go. Sorry about this.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
That. Just in terms of organization of those.
Yeah.
Because you could picture that over the course of the year, you're going to have hundreds maybe of responses to students. So are you going to tag those with the content that's on them then, so that they're easy to find, or how are you going to make it so it's really like if you just put something Samantha's question? If I go in, I'm not going to know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So right now, I haven't thought about that. Right now, I've thought about that student who just asked me the question, getting their response in 15 minutes.
Right.
And I have yet to put thought into what happens after that with that response. So I'd love to chat with you about ways of doing that. Yeah.
The videos run subjects to teaching units.
Yeah. And I'm so new with the iPad thing, so I'm just trying to find out a way to use it. Because I feel guilty. Like, I feel like I should use these programs that just came out because they overlap so much with what I'm into. But I can't let go of this way of doing it yet. I'm not ready to. And I was thinking, like, I know a lot of you guys are going one-to-one. If you have a one-to-one iPad program, I think it'd be really cool if kids, were working in a group and then really quickly using Replay Note, made a little quick presentation, sent it, popped up there on the channel, and you as a class watch that together. So it's a cool way of reporting out as a group too, because the annotation and screencasting is so accessible. It's like right there. There's no learning curve. A kid could use this immediately without any instruction. So I thought that would be a cool way of using it as well. So if I were to pick anything though, if it were my choice, no cost, what would I do if I had a Mac? I'd use this, not the Bamboo. So $250 down the drain right there. I'd use Jarnal more than anything because of all the pen colors. A little bit of a learning curve. If my video was greater than 5 minutes, I'd use Screenflow. If my video was less than 5 minutes, I'd use Jing. That's what I do. I'd send it to YouTube. I'd use Google Docs to make a form, and I'd put it on a Google site. I'm not using Google Site. I'm using something called Rapid Weaver to build my website on the Mac, but you could use whatever you want. If I had a PC, I would use this as well. I would use Zornal. Greater than 5 minutes, I'd use Camtasia Studio. Less than 5 minutes, I'd use Jing. And then everything else is the same. So really the difference lies in the screencasting and the annotation piece. But that's what I would do if I had an unlimited amount of money. And there's some all-in-one options. So what I mean with all-in-one is everything's built in. So there's a website called Sketchcast.com. Sketchcast has everything built in other than your thing. So you can plug your tablet in, go to Sketchcast.com. It's going to record. It's going to give you a place to do your writing. It's going to give you annotation tools. It's going to publish it. And you can get the embed code and you're good to go. It's limited, though. You can't write over PDFs. There's a lot of stuff like that you can't do. But if you need to do a quick thing for a third grade class talking about how to isolate X, really great for that. So it's basically like Replay Note online, though. And then on my website, I built in a couple things that I'll show you at the end that I'm trying to manipulate some of the tools online to make it online all in one place for you. And here are the ones on the iPad. So these are places where you can mush all those steps together that I talked about. In terms of cost options, and these slides can be found on my website and also the Google site for this YouTube studio. This is the low-cost option and the high-cost option on a PC. So $69 to around $280. There is a teacher version that's cheaper for Camtasia Studio, so that's why it's not that high. It's like 190 something. And on the Mac, the low-cost option, those are the things that you could use, and that's the high-cost option. So, sorry I went through that real fast. You guys can access those slides when you talk about it. That's my classroom. That's where I do mainly my recording. I made that little recording studio out of cardboard and egg crate. It's kind of ridiculous looking, but it works really well. So it's just an example of how this stuff can be done for really cheap. So does anyone have any questions? I know there's a lot. There's a mouthful. Should we go through? Okay, why don't I show you this little online feature. I'll show you what I'm trying to do with it so you can get an idea. And I really think if any of you guys are like looking for a business to start or something, I think that this is there is no real good all-in-one space to do this online. There isn't anything like Replay Note or something online. And I think the reason there's a good, I mean, this is real-time writing where the iPad isn't. So I think something's waiting for someone to do it. And I'm trying to do it a little bit in kind of a poor man sort of way. So if you go to Tools, All-in-One, and you go down here to Labs, and you click on Blank Canvas Recording, and you guys can use this. I mean, it works well. You can click here, Record, and when you click Record, all it's going to do is launch the Screencast-O-Matic recorder. Okay, and then down here, here's a place to write. Right? So you would click Record. It's going to take you to Screencast-O-Matic. You're going to allow the recorder to launch. Okay, it's going to give you that. There's the frame. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to, where was I? Is it over here? Here's my blank canvas. So I'm going to go back to my blank canvas, and then I'm going to drag that recorder over the blank canvas that I have down here, and then what I have built in is just like a pen tool thing where you can then do your recording. So it's built into the website. So it's all in one right there. I mean, it's kind of, I just had an extra 5 hours on my hand one day. And then I got the same thing if you want to do a PDF recording. So you're going to go here, you can click record, it's going to launch a Screencast-O-Matic recorder, and then Crocodoc is built into the website. So you can upload a PDF right to the website, and then click record and do it. So all the tools can be built in for you if you wanted to try it. Just an example of ways of bringing this all together. Okay. All right, well, I'm excited to work with you guys later on, so thank you very much. Appreciate it.